So this is moral foundations theory. So basically it's developed by Jonathan Haidt, who's this kind of moral philosopher. This idea that each culture has these intuitive ethics that we all kind of lean on to it a bit in different ways. That they've kind of grown up a bit like taste buds, right? That we have different taste receptors on our tongues. So different people kind of respond to tastes in different ways. Some people love sour things, right? And some people hate it. I do not like things that are sour. I don't like sour gummy worms. I don't like vinegar. I don't like olives. I don't like things with sour. Other people love sour. Some people really love bitter. Like I love a good dark chocolate. Others don't like that. Doesn't mean they're bad people. Doesn't mean they don't have those taste receptors. They just don't favor those. People have different flavors and taste sensations they like more than others. It's the same kind of with this moral foundations theory. So situation is we are divided, polarized world. It's not just a U.S. issue at all. It's a world issue. And often we struggle to try to understand why are we so divided on these different issues? Why can we not see things the same way? It seems like we talk to somebody and we cannot understand why we can look at the same data, look at the same situation, and come at it from opposite views. And we tend to think, okay, I'm right and holy and righteous and moral, and the other side is wrong and wicked and evil. So moral foundations theory helps us to understand that a bit. Now, as mentioned at 8 o'clock, some people kind of say, well, it seems to overgeneralize. And yes, it's correct. It does give a generalization. A lot of things you have to eventually generalize stuff. You have to take it with a grain of salt and understand people are complicated. Things merge from one to the other. But in general, through a lot of different surveys and questions and things like that, you kind of come to some general assumptions about how liberals and conservatives think of these different moral kind of foundations. So we'll kind of start looking at the 6 foundations. You can read some of the intro stuff later on your own. It'll be fun. So the first is the care-harm foundation. It refers to the psychological machinery within human beings which prompts us to care about our fellow human beings to try to help them avoid harm. This foundation evolved as a result of the vital importance of caring for vulnerable children. If a crying little girl tells you she lost her mom at Target, you're probably going to feel inclined to help her and not just push her down and laugh at her. This foundation makes us sensitive to signs of need and suffering and makes us despise cruelty. Because this foundation, we're triggered by such things as animal abuse, human rights violations, genocide, torture, poverty. Politically liberal people tend to heavily favor this moral foundation above all others. This tends to result in liberals having a more global perspective, expressing care and concern for all people and animals, regardless of national boundaries. They don't see the care principle being kind of limited to a nationalism. If there's someone or some situation happening around the globe, it's still harm. It still should be dealt with and fixed. Their care-harm foundation tends to I'll skip that. So the political conservatives also make use of this moral foundation, but they don't favor it above all others. Thus, their care-harm foundation tends to manifest as preferential care for their particular nation or group, with special care afforded to those who have sacrificed for the group, such as wounded veterans. Now, that does not mean liberals don't care about wounded veterans. It's kind of that priority, that thing that hits you more. So liberals tend to focus their highest thing on care-harm principle. Especially in the West, educated religious societies, most morals come down to a harm principle in some ways that if someone's harmed, that's the major thing if something is wrong. If no one's harmed, people don't usually care as much about it. That's not so true in the East. Now, there are exceptions, especially when it comes to a later moral foundation of like sanctity, degradation. There are certain things that we think of as sacred, so even if no one is harmed, we think it's morally wrong. Whether it might be burning a flag. There was a case he mentions in the book, which is extreme, but the idea of somebody years ago advertised looking for someone who was like a fit, healthy 21 to 38-year-old who wouldn't mind being like carved up and eaten. And somebody responded to the ad and said, sure, and he was slaughtered and eaten. And they made a video where he was saying, I'm all for this, I don't mind. So, what charges can be brought? It's not murder. No one was harmed that didn't want to be harmed, and yet we think it's morally wrong. Why is that? It goes probably to one instance of the sanctity of the idea of sanctity of human life. How we look at that's different. Some people think, okay, sanctity of human life, we can never die on our own accord, so no euthanasia. But we're fine with euthanizing our dog or a cat. Others say, we want to end suffering, so euthanasia is okay because this is causing more harm. Both are coming from a moral place, but looking at it differently. Does that make sense? So that's kind of care harm. Liberals focus on this most of all, usually in a global sense. Conservatives focus on it too, but don't put as much weight into it, and usually tend to focus more so hierarchically in their group, their nation, etc. The next is the Fairness Cheating Foundation. It refers to the psychological mechanisms which allow us to categorize actions as fair or unfair. This foundation evolved as a result of humans forming reciprocal partnerships. Once you kind of create a society where you need each other, you have the chances to cheat each other as well. You have to trust one another to be able to work together to produce, to say, if you're going to grow this, I'm going to grow this. And you're not going to come steal my stuff, right? So there's fair and unfair. So this foundation is the bedrock of the popular understanding of or desire for karma. Even though as Christians we may not believe in karma, so to speak, so big in Hinduism, it's often kind of in us too. Because we kind of think, if I do good, good will come to me. And we kind of hope sometimes if someone does bad, bad will come to them. We use it in a phrase like serve them right. That's the Fairness Cheating Foundation. Or when somebody is cheating, you hope they get caught and they fail. Like if you are in a class and someone in your class is constantly cheating, you don't want to tell on them, but you kind of hope they get caught and they fail that class. It's part of that cheating fairness principle. So we often want to act altruistically toward non-kin because we expect to receive tit-for-tat benefits. As with the Care Harm Foundation, the Fairness Cheating Foundation is integral in the worldview of both political liberals. This is the other major foundation for liberals. Liberals tend to focus on two above all else: care harm, fairness cheating. And conservatives, though it manifests very differently, particularly in the domain of economics. Liberals are primarily concerned with the mega wealthy 1% cheating the system through loopholes and privilege, where conservatives are often primarily concerned with people taking unfair advantage of the social safety net to live off of government benefits and the hard work of others. So both are kind of seeing what seems to be fair, but coming at it very different ways. Real world examples with kind of fairness and equality. So at my previous church, we had a group make cookies every Sunday morning. We had cookies for every post-worship fellowship. One of the favorite cookies was peanut butter cookies. Eventually, as we started getting more kids, we had kids that had serious allergies to peanuts. So it was decided we're not going to have peanut butter cookies anymore. Some people were really mad about that. That's not fair. We've always had peanut butter cookies. People like peanut butter cookies. Why are two kids going to make all of us not have peanut butter cookies anymore? Others said, these two kids, we don't want to exclude them from fellowship because if somebody touches a peanut butter cookie, then touches them, they can get badly sick. We don't want them to die. Somebody actually left the church over the unfairness of not having peanut butter cookies. Now that's a kind of an extreme example, but to him, this was a matter of fairness. But to others, it was a matter of fairness. Another example, I was watching Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood. There's an episode where the Owl gets to sit in the front of the trolley. It's his turn. He called it. He finally gets to sit in the front of the trolley. He's looking forward to it. But poor Katerina Kitty Cat is in the back of the trolley, and she gets sick in the back of the trolley. So the teacher asks, could you move back and let Katerina Kitty Cat sit in the front because she can't sit in the back because she gets sick and can. And O's like, that's not fair. It was my turn. In general, conservatives are going to kind of feel with the Owl, right? It's not fair. It was his turn. By all rights, he should get it. Does that mean he never gets it just because he happens to not ever feel sick? Where liberals are going to tend to say, Katerina the kitty cat, for no fault of her own, gets sick in the back of the trolley. No one's going to like it if she actually gets sick in the back of the trolley. This is more about equality, providing what is needed instead of just having what your benefit happens to be at the moment. So both sides are appealing to fairness, but doing so at ways that completely counteract each other. And we don't understand why the other side can't see it like we do, but same moral foundation, just approached differently. Does that make sense? So Haidt writes, on the left, fairness often implies equality, but on the right, it means proportionality. People should be rewarded in proportion to what they contribute, even if that guarantees unequal outcomes. So this is basically economic theory, right? You have the far kind of right laissez-faire economy where anything goes to get ahead and get as much money as you want. We don't have a complete free market economy. You have the far left idea of complete kind of communism. Everybody works hard. You just completely distribute things equally, even if somebody's contributing more or less. Those are the two extremes, but people think differently. What is the best way to manage equality, equity, outcomes, production, what's going to be better for society? But it often comes from this fairness cheating foundation, but looked at in different ways. So next you have the loyalty betrayal foundation. That's our capacity to be loyal to certain people or groups and feel a distaste for traitors. For most of human history, kind of tight-knit tribal groups were essential for survival and prosperity. And so this foundation evolved to facilitate the formation of long-term, tightly bonded groups. We needed tribes to survive. You need to trust your tribe. Nowadays, we still form tribes, but they're based on a much wider range of things, such as nationality, religion, sports team, whether you're Penn State or Ohio State, dietary choices, and much more. So our propensity for loyalty is balanced by a deep disdain for treachery, since a single traitor could undermine an entire system, right? I was in Greece, we went to Thermopylae. We learned the story of the Spartans holding off that pass against all these Persians. They were doing a good job until one traitor told the Persian army about a long way around the mountain to attack them from behind. All the Spartans and the others who were with them died because one traitor can ruin everything. So you think about in Dante's Inferno, the deepest, lowest, worst level of hell is reserved for traitors. Not murderers, not rapists, not thieves, but traitors. That's how much we have a disdain for traitors. So the loyalty betrayal foundation is one of the primary points of division between political liberals and conservatives. For conservatives, again, generalization, the loyalty betrayal foundation is typically given about as much weight as each of the other 5 moral foundations. As such, conservatives have historically been willing to accept war in a more aggressive foreign policy if it protects the United States. Liberals tend to favor the care-harm foundation much more than the loyalty betrayal foundation. So if it had to be a choice, they'd rather try to find a way for peace in favor of more pacifistic, globally minded foreign policy. You don't often have as many war hawks in the liberal camp as you would in the conservative camp. So, and of course this changes based on the situation, right? But after 9/11, it was much more loyalty. We got to protect our own. More people were feeling that way. But in other situations, you might have some saying we don't really need to address ourselves to a war in Ukraine. It's their business that can hurt us. Others are like, but it's part of our business. There's harm going on. There's children dying. We need to do something about it. Both are coming often from moral places of protecting ourselves, not sending our own troops over. We have our own problems with money, our own security. Others like, there's a problem going on over there. It could eventually affect our security, and there's harm happening. So different ways of looking at the same principle. Haidt sees both left and right as being tribal. He recognizes the left tends toward universalism and away from nationalism, so it often has trouble connecting to voters who rely on the loyalty foundation. So if you have people who are really kind of that loyal, this is our group, this is our nation, rah, 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 red, white, and blue, often liberals have a hard time connecting to that because they see kind of the more global worldscape and less focused on their own group, and that has often caused them problems. They're often portrayed as less patriotic because they have often a more universalistic outlook. Does that make sense? Then you have the authority subversion foundation. Refers to our capacity to appoint members of our groups to positions of power for the benefit of all, as well as our tendency to feel threatened by those who disrupt the status quo distribution of power. If we have a set power dynamic, we don't like people coming up and messing that up. For most of human history, authority was not power for power's sake. Rather, it was responsibility, power bestowed for the purpose of performing socially beneficial functions. In theory, that's how our government works, for the benefit, the goodwill of all the people. It's laid out for the protection, the prosperity, all of that. Some people trust power more than others. So, again, very generalized. Often if your mind works in the whole more conservative way, and it's not just politics, Republican, Democrat, it's just a more worldview, philosophical landscape, often conservatives find themselves, even like churches that have a more hierarchical structure, like the conservative church, the Catholic Church. You have a pope, the ultimate authority. You have bishops. You trust that structure. Presbyterians didn't trust power structures, right? So I have very little power on my own. The power is vested in the people with the session, with votes. There's no one person that has that because there's a little bit more distrust of that power structure. So this is why we are often, though, responsible to signs of rank, to uphold the hierarchical structure that ideally and utterly benefits us. We, of course, know that power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. There's been a lot of cases in history of kings and queens and dictators and whoever not working for the people. But you think about a mailman slapping the President of the United States, liberal or conservative, you're likely to wince internally upon considering such a scenario because you're not respecting the power of the office. Again, this foundation manifests quite differently nowadays for conservatives and liberals. Conservatives tend to have more trust in traditional hierarchies and authority figures. Liberals tend to not prioritize the authority subversion foundation as highly as the care, harm, and the fairness cheating foundation. So they're generally less concerned about matters of authority and are also more likely to be subversives. In general, liberals are going to more likely kind of question power structures. So most revolutions that change how power structures are created and maintained have come from what would be considered a liberal worldview, whether that's Runnymede in 1215 in England, or Arab Spring, or even the Revolution in America. It's that kind of thinking of we can change the power structures. Again, it's not always across the board, it's a generalization. Liberals also often respect moral authority figures more, whose power derives not from holding an elected office or high-status societal position, but from an intrinsic force of character. So they look to authority from people like Gandhi or MLK, and less somebody who has like a king or a president or some kind of official title like that. That makes sense. Then we have the Sanctity Degradation Foundation. It refers to our capacity to understand things as being sacred or pure and to feel a deep aversion of things being disrespected or desecrated. So no matter the era, humans have always considered certain things untouchable for being dirty or polluted. For a long time, that was to keep people safe and healthy. The flip side is we want to protect whatever is hallowed or sacred, whether it's objects, ideals, or institutions. The Sanctity Degradation Foundation arose from an evolutionary division between those who are open to new experiences and those who are not. Fascinatingly, and it's up for debate, Jonathan Haidt's research has shown that it's possible to predict whether someone is liberal or conservative based on whether they have a high or low degree of openness to experience. Whether it's going to a brand new place, trying brand new food, going to a brand new church environment, kind of making yourself uncomfortable trying something brand new. In general, those who are more open to that tend to be more liberal. Those who are not open to that tend to be more conservative. Again, generalizations just seen over a wide range of research. Initially, this openness, closed-offness functioned only in the domain of sensory experience, but over time it morphed into collective cultural tendencies to be open in certain areas and closed off in other areas, to view some cultural institutions, traditions as mutable, as others as untouchable, pure, and sacred. Think about it in the church, right? There have been changes in church over the decades where some people are like, yeah, we can think about this new thing, women being elders, women being pastors, different kind of music. For a long time, organs were considered the worst thing in the world. And then it became the standard. But it was the liberal kind of people who opened the change saying, well, don't we have this newfangled organ in the church? Now it might be, what if we had a guitar in the church? And people are like, oh. So are you open to new experience? Because often it comes down to something we feel is sacred. Are we open to maybe rethinking, does it have to only be this way? Is this really the sacred thing? Is it sacred that only men can be pastors? So when the church split over women ordination, in vast generalization, but pretty true, the conservative Presbyterians left and formed the PCA, and the more liberal Presbyterians stayed in what's now the PCUSA and allowed for women's ordination. Now you still have a spectrum of people, liberal, conservative, in that, but again, the general tendency, the more conservative churches left over that. Same thing with same-sex marriage. You have all these splits in each church, Methodist, Lutheran. When something is brought up as maybe we should change this, who's in charge? Who can participate? How we do music, whatever. Those who aren't willing to accept it, those who are willing to accept it, doesn't matter necessarily who's right or wrong. You have splits down these kind of ideological lines often. And so that's why you have all these different splits in churches, often around the sacredness of something. Sometimes it's an idea, sometimes it's a thing. Think about what's sacred in our church that has actually no holy power, but we consider it sacred. Can anybody name something that's kind of sacred? A person, a thing, a memory that you better not touch, because for whatever reason we think it's sacred. Communion way, like the pewter. Like if we got rid of the pewter, no, we can't not have that being used. We can't switch out. That's part of our history. It's just old. Yeah, it'll give us lead poisoning if we actually drink out of it, but we can look at it. That's something. We talked about it. It was kind of happened by mistake, but the shadow of the cross. Thinking about losing that to change the state of the sanctuary, that really just kind of viscerally hit some people. Like, no, we can't lose that. There's different things that for whatever reason we hold as sacred, and it's very important to keep it. So people tend, maybe, again, that not just politically, that larger conservative mindset, or we want to protect those things more viciously, where people with that more liberal mindset are more open to, we can consider why that's the case. Do we have to keep it forever? Because often how just our minds are wired too. One's not right and one's not wrong. You need both, right? Often, again, in general, liberals are the people that are going to push new things forward. They're the gas in the car. You need the gas to get places, or you're always going to stay the same. You're never going to learn anything new, go anywhere new. Conservatives are often the brake pushers. Like, well, do we want to change that? Do we want to get rid of that? Do we want to go move to a new thing? They're the brakes in the car. If you have a car with no brakes, you may go somewhere, but you may not get there alive, and you may bypass it because you have no brakes. So if you have a church or anything else that has no liberals, you're never going to go anywhere. You're never going to do anything new. You're going to be stuck, and you're not going to have a very vibrant life. Now, if you have no conservatives, you're going to be running off all these places and making a bunch of mistakes and causing a bunch of harm and problems. Because you need both brake and you need gas. You need the people that push you forward and the people that say, well, hold on, wait a minute. Is that actually the good place forward? And it's different ways of thinking. You need both, which is why diversity is so important, because people who think differently about things are needed in this world. That's why we try to have a session that has conversation, because some of you might think this is a great idea, and some of you people might say, have you thought about this? No. Well, you should. Oh yeah, that makes sense, because it never even crossed their mind. So the Sanctity Degradation Foundation is fascinating. An impulse to avoid disease born out of the behavioral immune system has evolved into a psychological mechanism which causes people to adopt extreme and sometimes irrational values to protect themselves and keep their groups together. The Sanctity Degradation is one of the more dangerous ones because people are willing to fight over what they consider holy. So many wars and things have been caused by this because somebody desecrates something they think of as holy. The Muslim world doesn't like a lot of the Western world because they feel the Western world has often stepped on, trounced, violated the things they think are most holy. Vice versa, often Christians get really mad if they think people have violated what they think is holy. People are willing to go to war, to fight, to go to jail over these things. Whether it's, I have my strong belief about this about marriage, about this about abortion or choice, this about whether you can burn a flag or burn a cross or burn a Bible or a Quran. We get really tied into that, and often we're willing to fight others over keeping what we think is sacred protected. So understanding how that works is a key to peace and reconciliation. Lastly, he added this one last. It wasn't in the original work. It was added later. Is the Liberty Oppression Foundation. That's the human tendency to desire freedom and to be averse to oppression. Haidt suggests that its tendency traces its roots back to the rise of agriculture about 10,000 years ago when humans became more sedentary. Private property came into existence because humans were now able to own more than they could carry with them wherever they wanted. This soon resulted in some individuals seeking to gain more than others by whatever means possible, many of which were dishonest, malicious, deprived certain helpless people of equal opportunities, limiting their freedoms. Since that time, most human societies have witnessed an ongoing struggle between those who fight for equal opportunity for all people and those who try to establish an uneven playing field for their own gain. Look at history, that's often the general big thing. Those who say, get what you can, however you can, it's fine. And they'll say, no, we're going to create rules and structures to try to keep this maintained. And there's a balance in between of how much control versus how little control. And America has seen that change over time. Remember Upton Sinclair's The Jungle, because there was no oversight of what was going into food, some bad things were happening. When there's no oversight, you can do what you want. You can sell snake oil. So that was a time they said, well, maybe we should have some more control. You can have too much control, possibly. It affects the economy. Conservatives, liberals differ on how much control, how much oppression versus liberty. So the ways in which this foundation manifests in the modern political landscape are quite fascinating. Libertarians tend to esteem this foundation above all, placing absolute value on maximizing individual liberty. Conservatives tend to view high taxes, strict business regulations, and sovereignty-reducing globalist policies as oppressive because they reduce individual liberty. It's why many libertarians tend to vote Republican. They see eye to eye on that point. Example, the U.S. is one of only a few nations who did not sign on to the ICC, the International Criminal Court. The United States helped kind of draft it and everything, but ultimately decided not to sign it along with places like China and Russia and Saudi Arabia and things like that, because ultimately they didn't want anybody else having any say over the decisions or the people of America, because that kind of felt like, okay, we're beholden to somebody. They could arrest our people, say what a leader did was illegal, so we didn't sign on to it. That's that key kind of liberty piece going on. For liberals, the Liberty Oppression Foundation manifests as an overpowering desire to protect and liberate any special interest group who may somehow be disadvantaged by the current social order. So they see, hey, there's people being oppressed by these laws, whether that's African Americans in the 20s and 30s and 40s, or women in the 60s, or whatever group. Like, these people are being oppressed. We want liberty for them. So it's often different ideas of liberty bat heads with each other. Unlike conservatives, liberals are much more willing to limit the freedoms of other people in a society in order to increase services and benefits for the less fortunate. An example, not that long ago, ADA compliance, right? So liberals push that to say, hey, people need equal access to public buildings, to government buildings. Often conservatives say, this is going to cost us money. You're saying what we have to do with our own buildings, our own businesses. It's going to change up the architecture. It's going to be a huge burden. Others say, yeah, but it's a burden for these other people not to be able to get in to these places at all. So it's two ideas of, you're making me do this, where's about my liberty? Or here's an oppressed group, they need some liberty from it. Same moral foundation, but completely different ways of looking at it, which causes conflict. That makes sense? The left generally wants liberty for the underdogs and the victims, coinciding with their emphasis on fairness cheating. The right wants liberty from government intrusion. And that's not always the case. Sometimes the right wants more government intrusion to protect something that they believe is sacred. So you can sometimes, depending on what value you're placing the most on, you're willing to shift this down to raise this up. And it's the same thing with liberals. Okay, now we want more government or less government interaction because we want to be able to do what we want in this situation. So there's often hierarchies of what's most important. So you can read some of this conclusion stuff. There's a chart on the back. One of the interesting things is, 2,000 years ago, a house divided against itself cannot stand. Although we progressed quite far in many ways, humanity itself yet seems to be a house divided, and eventually we will no longer be able to stand if we cannot heal these divisions. As a world, as a nation. Moral foundations theory in Haidt's work offers a possible way out, a way of understanding the deep biological and cultural reasons that we are divided in order to transcend the shallow reactive tribalism. Instead of just assuming you're bad, I'm good, you're selfish, I'm not, maybe understanding what their moral philosophy is that's guiding this decision. What's that deep-rooted innate sense that's making them make this gut reaction to this or that thing? On a somewhat related note, one of the fastest ways I can tell if someone leans right or left is by asking the simple question, what is the bigger threat to our country today, big government or big business? Those on the left always see the government as protecting against big business. Those on the right almost always see the big businesses as fighting governmental overreach. Now, that's a little bit changed now. You have a bit more of an oligarchical system going on where big business and government are more married. So now both sides can be scared of both to a degree. So the question doesn't work quite as much anymore because you've had these two things that people often feared in bed with each other so much. So what's the new thing going to be? Time will tell. Questions, comments, snide remarks. That's a whole lot of stuff in a short amount of time. Read it later. Questions, things. All righty, thank you very much. I think next week, we're talking about Martin Niemöller and timely topics. And the whole concept, first they came for, and when they came for me, there was no one left. We'll talk more about the context of that. Have a good one.